In the great hall, the music shifted. A grand horn blew 3 slow notes. That meant guests of honor had arrived. Doran tilted his head. He listened. Earth had only recently joined the wider Galactic Council. The Tovari thought of humans as small, soft, and slow, easy to overlook. The Empire had agreed to host a few human envoys only because the Council had pushed for it. Doran had heard the servants whispering about the humans for days. Some called them weak. Some called them strange. Some said they smiled too much. There was a pause, then polite, dry clapping. Doran could almost feel the rolled eyes of the nobles. A cook. The humans had sent a cook. The Tovari had sent warriors and admirals to Earth, and the humans had sent a man who made food. "You are the human cook," the Emperor said. His voice was deep and slow. "We have heard you wish to share food with our court." Daniel bowed again and stepped to the side. As he moved, his eyes scanned the long royal table. He had read the protocols on the way here. He had memorized the names of the royal family. The Emperor, the Empress, the eldest prince, who was off on a campaign, Lady Murray, the elder daughter, and one more name, listed in small letters, almost as a footnote. Prince Doran, youngest son. Daniel looked at the table. He counted the seats. He counted the people. There was an empty chair near the far end. No plate, no cup, no name card, just an empty space, as if no one was expected to sit there at all. He frowned, but only for a second. A servant passed near him carrying a tray. Daniel leaned in slightly. "Pardon me," he said, his voice low. "The youngest prince. Where does he eat?" The servant froze. His eyes flicked to the side, toward a closed door at the back of the hall. "He eats alone," the servant whispered. "He has always eaten alone." "Why?" Daniel asked. The servant looked around quickly. "Please, sir, do not ask. It is not a thing we speak of." Then the servant hurried away. Daniel stood quietly, holding his hands behind his back. The music played on. The nobles laughed. The Emperor drank from his great horn. And somewhere, behind a closed door, a young prince was eating cold scraps in the dark. Daniel did not say anything. He did not show what he was thinking. But deep inside, something steady and stubborn settled in his chest. He would find that door, and he would open it. At last he came to a narrow hall behind the great banquet room. He could hear the faint sound of the kitchen far away, the clatter of pots, the bark of cooks. But here, the hall was silent. There was one door. Plain. Old. Without a sign. Daniel paused. He listened. Inside, he heard a soft sound. A spoon on wood. A slow, careful chewing. "You may," he said at last. Daniel did not show shock on his face. He had learned long ago that pity could shame a person more than cruelty. He simply walked closer, slow and steady, so the prince could hear his steps and know where he was. "May I sit, your highness?" he asked. Doran turned his head toward the voice. His pale silver eyes did not focus on Daniel, but his face did. He gave a small nod. "You may sit," Doran said. "But I am not called your highness in this room. I am only Doran here." Daniel knelt on the floor, just across from the prince. He placed his cloth bundle gently on the stone. Doran could hear the soft sound of the cloth being unwrapped. He could smell something he had never smelled before. Warm bread. Real, fresh bread. Sweet and soft. "What is that?" Doran asked. His voice had a small tremble in it. "It is bread from my homeworld," Daniel said, "and honey from a small farm near my mother's house. I brought it for you." Doran's hands shook slightly. "For me?" "Yes," Daniel said. "I saw your seat at the table the other night. There was no plate, no cup. I asked about you, and they told me you eat alone. I did not understand it. I still do not. So I came." Doran was silent. He did not know what to do with kindness. It felt strange in his chest, like a warm coal he could not hold. "Why?" he whispered. "Why would you come? You do not know me. You are a guest of my father. If he learns of this, he will be angry." "Then he will be angry," Daniel said quietly. "But you should not eat cold scraps in the dark while your family eats meat in the light. That is not honor. That is just cruelty wearing a crown." Doran lowered his head. He did not speak for a long moment. Daniel did not rush him. He simply tore a piece of the warm bread, dipped it lightly in the honey, and held it out. "Open your hand, please," Daniel said. Doran lifted his hand slowly. Daniel placed the small piece of bread in his palm with care, as if giving him something precious. "Smell it first," Daniel said. "Then taste it." Slowly, Doran lifted the bread to his face. The smell was warm and sweet and soft, like nothing he had ever known. His mouth shook. He took a small bite. His eyes did not see, but a tear ran down his cheek. He had not known food could taste like this. He had not known a meal could feel like a gift. "Why are you crying, Doran?" Daniel asked gently. "I am not crying," Doran said, even as more tears fell. "I am only eating." Daniel smiled, and his own eyes burned a little. Outside the door, far down the hall, an old servant had been passing by. He had stopped when he heard the soft voices. He stood there now, listening. He did not move. He did not breathe. And in his heart, something old and quiet began to wake up. The forgotten prince was no longer alone. Daniel took that as a yes. "It is a soup my mother used to make," Daniel said, "when I was sick, or sad, or just tired." The girl did not ask any more questions, but she watched him with quiet eyes. Inside, Doran sat up at once. He had been waiting. He had been afraid Daniel would not come back. He had told himself many times today that he must not hope. Hope had hurt him before, but the rhythm of that knock made his heart jump. "Come in," Doran said, trying to keep his voice steady. Daniel slipped inside and closed the door. He looked around the small room. Today he had brought one more thing under his arm, a small folded blanket. He had thought the stone floor too cold for any meal. He spread the blanket carefully on the floor, then placed the tray upon it. "Tonight," Daniel said, "we eat together." Doran's lips parted. "Together?" "Yes," Daniel said. "I will not stand and watch you eat. That would not be a meal. That would be charity. I am hungry too. We will share." Doran did not know what to say. He felt his hands tremble. Daniel guided the prince's hand gently to the edge of the tray. "Here is the bowl of soup. It is warm but not hot. Here, beside it, is the flatbread. It is round and soft. You can tear it. And here is a small dish of butter." Doran's fingers moved slowly, learning the shape of each thing. The bowl was smooth and round. The bread had soft little ridges from where it had been pressed. The butter dish was small, almost like a toy in his palm. Daniel tore a piece of bread and put it in Doran's hand. "Dip it in the butter first, then in the soup." Slowly, Doran did as he was told. He lifted the soft, warm bite to his mouth. He chewed, and his shoulders fell slightly, as if a great weight had stepped off them. The taste was rich and gentle. It tasted of care. "This is," Doran began, but his voice caught. "Take your time," Daniel said softly. They ate together on the floor, on the small blanket, in the dim light of a single lantern. Daniel ate too, tearing his own bread, dipping it in the same soup. He did not flinch at the rough room. He did not seem to notice the cold stone walls. He simply ate and talked. He told Doran about Earth, about wide green fields, about oceans that moved, about the small kitchen where his mother had taught him to cook when he was a boy, about the first cake he had ever burned, about the way rain sounded on a tin roof. Doran listened with his whole face. He laughed once, very small, when Daniel spoke of the burnt cake. The laugh surprised Doran himself. He had not made that sound in many years. He covered his mouth with his hand, almost ashamed of it. "Do not hide that," Daniel said. "It is a good sound." "I do not laugh in this room," Doran said quietly. "I did not know I still could." "You can," Daniel said. "You should. Often." When the meal was done, Daniel cleaned the tray, folded the blanket, and tucked everything together. Before he left, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small wooden spoon. It was simple, smooth, carved by hand. He placed it gently in Doran's palm. "This is yours now," he said. "I made it on the journey here. I did not know who I would give it to. Now I do." Doran closed his fingers around the spoon. It was warm from Daniel's coat. Outside, in the long corridor, the old servant who had listened the night before now stood with two younger workers. They had heard the soft talk. They had heard the small laugh. A whisper began that night, soft as wind. The forgotten prince was eating with the human, and smiling. "Your Majesty," he said, "there is a matter that cannot wait." "Bring the human," he said. Two guards left at once. Lady Maria's hands tightened slightly at her sides. She did not look at her father. A short while later, Daniel was brought into the throne hall. He walked between the two guards with calm, even steps. He had not been forced. He had not been roughly handled. They had simply asked him to come, and he had come, leaving the kitchen knife in its sheath and his apron folded on a stool. He bowed before the emperor. Not too low, not too high. A bow of respect between equals. "You are the human cook," the Emperor said. His voice was low and slow, like distant thunder. "We hear that you have entered the chamber of our youngest son without leave. Is this true?" "It is true, Your Majesty," Daniel said. A small sound passed through the gathered nobles. Some leaned forward. Some leaned back. "You knew this was forbidden," the Emperor said. "I was never told it was forbidden, Your Majesty," Daniel said gently. "I was only told it was not spoken of. There is a difference." Salas stepped forward, his thin face like cold stone. "Do not play with words, human. You knew the prince was kept apart. You knew our customs. You broke them on purpose." "I broke nothing, sir," Daniel said. "I only sat on a floor and shared a piece of bread with a young man who had never been asked to share one before." "He is no young man," Salas snapped. "He is a flaw in a royal line. He is a shadow upon the bloodline. Our laws say a flawed heir must remain hidden. That is not cruelty. That is honor." Daniel did not raise his voice. He turned his eyes to the Emperor, calm and steady. "Your Majesty," he said, "may I ask one question?" The Emperor gave a small nod. Daniel took a slow breath. "What kind of empire," he asked softly, "starves its own blood?" The hall went silent. The kind of silence that hurts. The nobles did not breathe. Salas's mouth opened, but no words came out. The Emperor's hand tightened on the arm of his throne. "You are bold, human." "I am only honest, Your Majesty," Daniel said. "On my world, even the poorest mother gives her sick child the warm part of the soup. She does not hide him in a cold room and toss him bones. You have a son. He is gentle. He is kind. He is wise beyond his years. He has lived in the dark longer than I have been alive. And tonight, your nobles will laugh and drink, and he will sit alone again, eating cold scraps. Forgive me, Your Majesty. I was raised to call that shame, not honor." Several of the older nobles looked away. Salas hissed, "Throw him in the lower decks. He has insulted the throne." "No," said a soft, clear voice. Every head turned. Lady Murray had stepped forward from beside her father. Her hands were shaking, but her face was firm. Her green robe shimmered slightly in the lamplight. She did not look at Salas. She looked only at the Emperor. "Father," she said, "the human has only said what I have not had the courage to say for many years." The Emperor's eyes turned to her, surprised. "I have walked past that door 1,000 times," Murray said, her voice trembling but clear. "I have heard our brother breathing on the other side. I have laughed in the great hall while he sat in the dark. I told myself it was tradition. I told myself it was honor. But it was fear. It was my own fear. And I am tired of carrying that fear." She turned slightly toward Daniel. Her eyes were wet. "This human came into our home as a guest," she said, "and he has shown more love for my brother than I have. That truth burns me. I cannot stand here and watch him be punished for it." The hall stayed silent. The Emperor stared at his daughter. Salas's face was white with anger, but he did not speak. He could not. The words of a royal daughter, spoken in open court, were not so easily dismissed. The Emperor lowered his eyes for a long moment. He looked very tired. "Leave us," he said finally. "All of you. I must think." The court emptied slowly. Daniel walked out beside 2 guards, but they no longer looked at him as a prisoner. They looked at him as something they did not yet understand. In the corridor, a new whisper began. The forgotten prince had a defender now, and she was royal blood. The Emperor stayed in his private rooms. He took no visitors. Salas paced outside his door like a wolf shut out of a cave. Lady Murray waited in her own chamber, hands folded, refusing all food except plain water and a bit of fruit. Daniel was placed under polite watch in the human envoy quarters. He was not chained, not beaten, not insulted. But 2 guards stood at his door, and he was not allowed to walk the halls. A guard came to Doran's door. He did not knock harshly. He knocked twice, gentle. "Your Highness," the guard said. His voice was low and almost shy. "The Emperor commands your presence at the family table tonight." Doran sat very still. He thought he had heard wrong. "Say that again," he whispered. "The Emperor commands your presence at the family table, Your Highness." Doran's hands began to shake. He could feel his heart beat in his throat. "Who else will be there?" he asked. "Lady Murray," the guard said. "A small number of trusted nobles. The human envoy, Daniel Carter." Doran lowered his head. A small breath escaped him, half laugh, half sob. A short while later, 2 attendants arrived at his chamber. They had brought a clean, dark blue robe, simple but well made, with silver thread along the edges. They helped him into it with quiet hands. They did not pull him roughly. They did not speak with cold voices. One of them, an older woman, gently combed his white hair back from his face. "You look fine, Your Highness," she said softly. "Truly fine." Doran's pale eyes filled. He could not see her face, but he could hear her kindness. When the time came, Daniel was brought to him. The two of them met in the corridor outside the chamber. Daniel placed his hand gently on Doran's elbow. "I am here," Daniel said. "I am afraid," Doran whispered. "I know," Daniel said. "Walk slow. Lean on me if you need. We go together." They walked. The doors of the family hall were tall and carved with old hunting scenes. They opened with a slow, heavy sound. The hall inside was smaller than the great banquet room, lit with warm gold lanterns. A long table stood in the middle, set for 10. The Emperor sat at the head. Lady Murray stood beside her chair on the right. A handful of older nobles, hand-picked, sat along the table. Salas was not there. Every face turned as Doran stepped through the doorway. Some of the nobles had never seen him before. Their eyes widened. They had imagined some twisted creature, some shameful thing kept behind a door. What they saw was a slim young man in a clean blue robe, walking softly with his head held a little low, guided by the steady hand of a human. Daniel led Doran to the empty chair at the long table. The chair that had been empty for so many years. Tonight, it had a plate, a cup, a folded cloth napkin, a small carved name marker, freshly made. "Prince Doran." Daniel guided the prince's hand to the back of the chair. "You are home, Doran," he said quietly. Doran sat. The wood of the chair creaked softly beneath him. He placed his trembling hands on the table. His fingers found the smooth edge of the plate, the cup, the carved name marker. He turned his face toward the head of the table, toward where his father sat. The Emperor was silent. His old eyes did not leave his son. There was something in his face that few had ever seen. Not anger, not pride, something quieter, something that looked almost like sorrow. Lady Murray sat down. Her hand reached gently across the table and rested on Doran's wrist for a moment. Just a moment. But Doran felt it like sunlight. The meal began. It was a simple meal. Roasted meats, soft bread, warm grain stew, a bowl of fruit. Servants moved quietly. Daniel, seated near the prince, kept his voice low and gentle, naming each dish as it was placed before Doran. He told him where the meat was on his plate, where the bread sat, where the small bowl of butter waited. He guided his hand only when needed, and not too much. He let the prince eat with his own dignity. A few of the older nobles watched and did not eat at first. They simply watched. They watched the human speak softly. They watched the prince listen. They watched Lady Murray smile, just a little, when her brother bit into a warm piece of bread. Then, slowly, the nobles began to eat too. One white-haired elder leaned to another and whispered, "He is well-mannered, more than my own grandson." Another murmured, "He has the same chin as the emperor in his youth." These were small words. Almost nothing. But in a court built on tradition, small words can crack stone. Near the end of the meal, the emperor lifted his cup. His hand was not quite steady. "To my son, Doran," he said, his deep voice quieter than usual, "who has sat too long in the dark." The cups lifted. The hall was warm. Doran lowered his face. His tears fell freely now. He did not hide them, and no one in that hall told him to. One quiet evening, the emperor asked for Daniel to come to his private study. The room was lined with old books and trophies of past hunts. A single low fire burned in a stone hearth. The emperor sat in a heavy chair by the fire, a cup of warm spiced drink in his hand. Daniel entered, bowed gently, and waited. "Sit, human," the emperor said. "Please." Daniel sat in the chair across from him. The emperor stared into the fire for a long time. The flames moved softly across his old gray face. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower than Daniel had ever heard it. "My son was born in a storm," the emperor said. "On the night of his birth, 3 of our great hunting beasts died in their pens. The court priest said it was a sign. They told me the child was cursed. I was young. I was afraid. I let them carry him to a back room. I told myself it was tradition. I told myself it was strength. Every year, I told myself the same lie. And every year, my son grew up alone." Daniel said nothing. He simply listened. "You came into my house," the emperor went on. "You ate his cold scraps with him on a stone floor. You did what I, his father, had not done in all his life. He turned his eyes to Daniel. They were wet. I have led armies. I have crushed rebellions. I have stood on 100 battlefields and never once felt afraid. But I was a coward in my own son's chamber for 30 years. Your Majesty, Daniel said softly, you are not a coward today. The Emperor closed his eyes. There will be a new law, he said after a long moment. No royal child of the Tovari will ever again be hidden for any flaw of the body. Not blindness, not lameness, not silence. They will sit at the table with their kin. They will be known by name. They will be loved openly. I will not be remembered as a great conqueror. I will be remembered as the father who freed my son too late. But better late than never. Daniel bowed his head. It is a good law, Your Majesty. The new decree was sent out the next morning. It traveled across the worlds of the Tovari Empire. In some palaces, hidden children were brought into the light for the first time. Old wet nurses wept. Forgotten siblings embraced. Some noble houses resisted, but the emperor's word was iron, and the people, hearing the story, had already begun to shift. In the wider galaxy, the council took quiet notes. The Tovari had once mocked humans as soft. Now those same Tovari spoke a human cook's name with respect. The other races did not say much, but they watched. They had begun to wonder what other things humans might be quietly capable of, beyond their soft skin and their small ships. The day came at last when Daniel had to leave. His mission with the human delegation was complete. He stood in the great docking hall in his clean white coat, his small travel bag at his feet. Doran stood before him, dressed now in the deep blue robes of a recognized royal son, with a thin silver circlet on his brow. Lady Murray stood at his side. The Emperor stood a little behind them, watching with quiet eyes. I do not know how to thank you, Daniel, Doran said. His voice was steady now, stronger than it had ever been. You do not need to thank me, Your Highness, Daniel said. You only need to keep eating at the table. Doran smiled. He reached into the folds of his robe and pulled out the small wooden spoon Daniel had once given him. He held it gently between his fingers. I will keep this with me always, he said. When I am old, when I sit at the head of my own house someday,